I probably have already introduced myself to most of you guys. Michael Sharman, Director of Product and Engineering out of the Sydney office.
Hi, I'm James Santilli. I'm a user experience designer and I work with the product team in Sydney and closely with Michael. So today we're going to be talking about these key sections. The objectives for authoring. We'll race through the Learnosity 101, which you just saw in the talk before. We'll talk then about how to configure our APIs. We'll dive into some code there. And in the last section, we'll show you how to take your solution even further by extending on top of our APIs. So our objectives for authoring. Whenever the product development team are exploring something new or we're reviewing something that we've just released, we check how well we measure against these product objectives. Powerful. Power is the superpower you get from our APIs. Your product's performance, speed, and time to market are all greatly enhanced. Flexible. Our solutions are designed in a way that you can configure an experience specifically for your users. We want you to meet the real-world needs of your users and do it without any heavy lifting. Extensible. Our APIs are practical. You can plug them in and build even more superpowers on top of them. And simple. Well, if it's not easy to use, no one will use it. Our APIs are easy to understand and should feel natural for you to integrate. So who do we develop for? We're thinking of content creators of all skill levels, novices to power users. Professional authors are the users that are in your product every day, and they're creating and publishing content in your item banks, things like items and assessments. Subject matter experts also create content in your item banks, but they tend to do so in bursts. SMEs review the clarity of items and analyze and test the effectiveness of assessments. They also require more advanced functionality than the professional authors do. Teachers may not be very computer savvy or trained to create content. They may also be creating content under the time pressure or with more interruption. Teachers require a lower barrier of entry and more in-product help. And besides making your users happy, we're thinking of your needs as developers as well. We build our tools so you can set them up right away. All you need to do is provide the context, change a few things, and then take all the credit for it. Balancing the needs of content creators and developers and answering to our product objectives has resulted in some impressive growth. Our authoring tools have helped our customers create over 2 million questions and features in the last 12 months. Our customers deliver an average of 46 million tests to students each month. These numbers are only the content that we know of. We have customers with private self-hosted solutions and their own item banks, so that number is going to be even larger. These numbers affirm that we're succeeding on our product objectives, and we're pretty proud of them.
So we went through the 101. I think most of you were here for that, so we'll probably race through this quite quickly. As we saw before, nothing fancy, nothing new. Technology you use every day. JavaScript, CSS, and just HTML. Similar as we saw before, we have the HTML hook. That's just where the API is going to be rendered on your page. We have the script to embed the API. We set up our request initialization options with the security signature, and then we call init at the bottom. The key thing here is the app instance. Much like with the assessment, the authoring is built in exactly the same way. So you call Learnosity author.init, and that will return into the variable you set, which is the app instance. And it's off that instance you can call events and public methods. We have the ready listener and the error listener. We've been through these before. The ready listener is where you put all your code, so you know the API is ready to go. And the error listener, recommend listening to that so you can catch any errors that might bubble up from the app itself. We saw this before with the items API. So authoring is the same. We have this babushka doll styled approach where you will interact with the author API, but the author API itself will bring in the question editor and then the questions API. So the author API does have a visual representation though. The grey toolbar at the top, being able to set item layouts and things like that, that's the author API. The question editor is about the properties that the author will use to actually author a question itself. And then when the question is being rendered as a live preview or for validation, that's the questions API. So again, starting with configuration, it's the first step. What can you do with the out-of-the-box things? We're going to run through just a bit of a subset here on layouts or duplicate items and those sorts of pieces. So for the first one, you might want your authors to be able to set layouts in their items. So by turning columns true, tabs true, you turn on those options for your authors. If you don't want them, you can pass in false. Maybe you want them to duplicate an item. For all sorts of different reasons, it's just duplicate true, and the little widget appears at the right of the save button. You could use this as yourself with a public method. You don't need to use our interface for this. Maybe you want read-only mode, at least in the visual perspective. So by just turning off things like columns and tabs and the mode, the edit preview mode, you can simulate a read-only mode there. Maybe you have some users who want to review content for approval. So again, all sorts of things you can do out of configuration. That's at the author API level. Drilling down into the question editor, same sort of approach. Maybe you want to do custom rich text editor styling. Maybe you want to implement a digital asset manager. So you can still use our rich text editor, click upload image, and your asset manager comes in instead of ours. So in this example, all we've done is simplify the toolbar at the top. We've turned off the change type button. We've hidden the source button. Most of your authors probably don't want to be reading JSON. And in this case, we've taken off the live preview that's usually on the right-hand side. We're just using the edit pane only. Custom styling is something that we've got in our newer editor. We have two editors that you can use. The newer one, WYSIHTML, gives you the ability to add custom styles in the drop-down. So why would you want to do this? Obviously, as building tools for content creators, they might have different styling needs. Maybe they want to do different styles for text, whether it's underlines or background colors. Maybe they want different feature box, all those sorts of things. You can just set those up in the initialization options. Specify the element. In this case, we'll just use a div or a span for a block or an inline element. Specify the CSS class to be applied. And then your authors are free to have richer content based on your custom styling. Of course, you need to load the style sheet at the same time. Moving into template groups, this is the overview page that an author will see when they're choosing which sort of question to create. So with that in mind, let's have a quick overview of template groups and question templates. Now, template groups, all they really are, they're just containers to hold templates. So that thumbnail view with all those thumbnails, the list on the left-hand side, that is the template groups. And then each of the thumbnails there, they're the actual templates, okay? And a template, a question template, is just a list of options that you can have based on a question type. So we're going to have a little bit of a look at a demo here on, there's my son, hi. Out of the box, you probably recognize this. This is what we see by default. These are the groups that we have, and these are the templates within those groups. Now, setting that up is pretty simple. The initialization or the request object for this can be pretty lean. In this instance, we've turned off the search field that is usually on the top left, and we're using the edit preview layout, so we want that live preview on the right-hand side. We're also using the new WYSIHTML editor. Okay, now, here what I've done is I've added two new groups to the top, so I've appended some groups. I like what you've got out of the box, but I want to add some more. In this instance, maybe I want an unscored group, a different sort of contextual grouping, maybe a text group. Okay, and the code for that, all we've done, the same request object, but now we've just added question type groups. And we put two at the front, text and unscored. We have some templates to go with them, but I'll talk about that in a second. So in this instance, the difference is on the left-hand side, I've removed all the default question type groups. So maybe I don't want all of your question types. Maybe the user, the author who's using this isn't interested in math or chemistry. Whatever context you might want, whatever scenario you want to cover, we can just reduce this list of groups and specify the templates within them. So to do that, all I've done is specify one extra little line, template defaults false. So again, we're just looking at configuration, things you can do in the JSON to control the user interface of the out-of-the-box functionality. So just a quick recap on groups and templates. They're pretty fundamental when you start looking at the question editor. The groups, they organize templates. Whatever context you want, whatever groupings that you need, you can name the groups, you can sort them vertically, you can add or remove groups to the custom ones, and you can have different templates in different groups. The question templates themselves, they define the inputs. They're what the authors actually interact with when they're entering the question, the correct answer, the distractor rationale, whatever the case is. So you can show or hide some of those. We're going to look at that in a second. You can set or override the default values that we have out of the box. And of course, the thumbnails themselves, you can put your own custom image there for the thumbnail. You can name it, and you can add a description. So a quick demo on some templates here. This example that we're looking at, the true-false, if I go back to our first true-false question type, and here's our true-false out of the box. Enter the question, true and false, set the correct answer, and the more options is still there. One of the problems we have, I suppose, is we have too much functionality. So we can't just turn it off because then what use is it? So it's always on for everybody by default. That's why we had this more options element to sort of hide the options that you might not often want to use. You might call them advanced options. But one of the things we can do here, if I come and have a look at true false on this one, it's a bit simpler. Just removed that more options element and a couple of the checkboxes that were there. How we do that is we've seen the template groups. Each group needs templates to be defined within them. So MCQ, which true false is based on, it's just a multiple choice question. If we have a look at the template structure for that, we can see we've just got an image, and this is what appears on the thumbnail. And then we go into the defaults. So what we call the stimulus, which is this question template. This text that will appear here, you can set that. So every time an author wants to create a new question, you could leave it blank. You could enter whatever you need. Looking at the options, we've just got true and false. And that's just these options here. Moving down, it's just an MCQ question type. We're defining a block style here. Just a different style for these users. So you can see this one is using a different questions API style. The one that you get out of the box uses default radio buttons. So again, depending on your needs, depending on what you want to do, we're defining the question template to meet the needs of the authors. Okay, now one of the key things you want to do, and this is where templates are sort of extra powerful, are these hidden elements. You can choose to hide specific inputs, or you can hide entire sections. So in this case, I've just hidden more options. And that's the difference where at the bottom, it's nice and clean. There's nothing there. So a recap on templates and groups. As we saw, the templates just hold, the groups can hold the templates, and the templates are what the users are actually entering as their question content. The third thing you need to know about, if you really want to go far, I suppose, is layouts. So with the templates, we quickly saw how you can show and hide things, and you can set the default values or override the default values. With layouts, you can position where things go in the question template, so where they're rendered. So you might want to think about it if you had a handlebars templating engine or a mustache or underscore or something like that. You're just specifying little placeholders on where you want things to be rendered. That's what we have layouts for. So you can also use them if you wanted to integrate your own custom functionality to make it look like a part of the editor, but it's actually your stuff. So a quick look on what we might do there. Looking at a passage. This is just a feature that we have, passage of text. By default, in more options, because not everybody uses these, we have these readability measures, a Lexile measure or a Flesch Kincaid. You can determine whether it contains math and choose the math rendering engine. That might be too complex for your authors, so you could do something like this. So what we're looking at here is a bit of a combination of everything. We've obviously done some CSS here, some styling, just like we looked at with assessment. You can use CSS to override the defaults. We've hidden some elements, so going back to the out of the box, more options is gone, contains mathematics is gone, and the heading is gone, because just for this fictional example, you just don't need them. And this estimated grade level, you might not recognize this because it's just a sample of custom functionality. It's not ours out of the box. If I pasted in some content there, it gave me a readability measure, 9.3. So then in the input, I could say, well, I'm going to, I don't know, round it up. So that's the option I'll actually store as an author. This is just a tool, maybe to assist your author. So again, just an example of how you can integrate your own functionality and make it look and appear native. So how do we do that? Well, looking through the configuration options, one of the things to note is we're just using the edit layout. So we hid the live preview on the right. Again, just simplifying. And we're specifying in the layout that the edit panel for a shared passage should use a different layout. All you need to do on your page then is load that layout. This is one of the examples. We're loading inside a script tag, just HTML. Divs and spans is all it is. Now, if you read down it, you can see content is my content of the passage. Custom readability level, this is the custom functionality added. This is not part of a Learnosity out-of-the-box layout. This could be you guys building something here. Okay, and it's just HTML. We've just got a div here, and we use some JavaScript down below to inject the readability measure based on what the author had entered. So we're just listening to change events, extracting the content, putting it through a little function, and extracting a readability measure. This is an example of what you can do. And at the bottom, we've just got the two default fields, the Flesch Kincaid and the Lexile. So another example of what you might want to do, again, wrapping these things together, templates and layouts and styling. I might want to have a poll question type. Now, in this one, again, it's very, very simple. If we look at the out-of-the-box multiple choice question type, which is really what this is based on, there's just a lot of fields here. Sometimes you need them, sometimes you don't. So this is an example of using a poll where I just need the question and I just need the responses. I don't need validation because I just want to capture the response. It's a poll scenario. So we've also removed the ability to add new options. Maybe I want to limit it always just to 4 options. And we've removed, in which case now we don't need the delete icon. Okay, a little bit of code on that. Same sorts of things. In the layout, we specified for MCQ. I want to use a dedicated MCQ layout. Now this one would be for every MCQ question. You can configure things differently. Per template can use a different layout. So you might have your regular multiple choice questions. Then you might have a specific one that was very simple. So you don't need to have a one size fits all. And down the bottom there, the layout is really simple. All we use is the stimulus and the options. What we've done here is we've removed everything else from the template, sorry, the layout. So we're only rendering the bare minimum in this example. So you might be wondering how you would create your own layouts, how you would create your own templates. You can download them from the doc site. So on this page, which is on our doc site, you can download all the layouts. So this is a layout for the multiple choice. This is how big it is actually, the one out of the box. It's quite long just because there's a lot of things in there. And remember, this is the new one that we just had for this poll question type. Very small. So you can download the layouts from the doc site and you can also download the templates and then you can edit as you need.
It's clear the configurations for Author API and Question Editor API demonstrate some powerful features out of the box. At this point, you're probably thinking, well, how can I further integrate this into my solution? Maybe your product has an add button in the global nav. Maybe your users are creating content in the product every day and need repeated access to that feature. What if you don't actually need all the template groups and question templates? You might not need the item edit view at all. Maybe on tap of the create button, you want to call a modal view and just ask your users to choose a question type. maybe your product has its own navigation controls, and your users have learnt that the cancel and the save buttons are in the footer of the view of all of your edit pages. We recognize that these use cases exist, and we've made our APIs flexible enough to support them. You can achieve this with some JavaScript, HTML, and CSS. Let's see how it's done.
Okay, so we're looking at a bit of a fictional example here. What we've got is maybe an actual website that you might have. This is our little Edtropolis content management system. Now, by default, if you load the Author API in, this is what you might see. And it fits in pretty well. You can edit existing content, obviously. You can create new content. Nothing fancy. You guys are probably using this already. Turn on columns, turn on tabs, etc. Okay, and then I can start to build my content. Now, if you wanted a tighter integration, as James was talking about, in what we've done here is we've removed the create button that you would ordinarily see on the right-hand side. If I go in and edit an item, I can see a few things at the bottom where we've got our toolbar breaking over the footer bar. But we have a save button in the bottom, and we've removed the grey toolbar from up here. We've added these buttons here. Again, it's just an example of what you guys might want to do to have a tighter integration into your content management systems. Maybe your authors are already used to the way a site looks and feels. Maybe you just disagree with the way we do things. That's fine. Okay, the point is you can add your own. So as we looked at with assessment, all we've done is, this is just regular HTML. It's just an unordered list. I think we've even got a little bit of a code sample. It's just an unordered list, okay, with an A element in there and a label and an icon. Pretty simple stuff. And all that's doing is loading these up here. On click of the button, we set a listener, and then we just call a public method. Nothing fancy. We saw that with assessment, and it's the same thing with authoring. So this navigates me out back to the list view. I could toggle between preview and edit. And again, what we're doing is removing the options from in here and it's bringing them up a level if you wanted to do that. Okay, if I wanted to edit something, same deal. I can do my changes and I have undo and redo. Instead of where they would normally appear in the toolbar, we've just brought them up. Your own custom HTML elements, your own listeners to listen for a click event, and then calling public methods to implement the behavior that we offer with your own user interface. So another interesting thing that you might want to do, I suppose, really make a shortcut for your authors. So in this example, if we had a create button, maybe we open just a modal window. And there's an option here where they can enter a reference. So whatever reference it is. I don't know if there's one already there, so I'll just say 5. And I could do that and just create a blank item, and straight in they go. Maybe I want to set up a little bit of a template. So I can say, well, hey author, what question type do you want? I say, well, I'm just interested in a pretty simple multiple choice. Maybe there's a set of passages that are out of the box that we want to use. So we've been doing, I don't know, Hemingway, so we'll choose a passage. And as I go in, I go straight to the question. So I've bypassed that list view. Instead of the author seeing that and then having to hit the big plus button, I've now got straight to here. They can author their question as they would do, hit the save button. And when they say save, now that they've got this question, this item rather, it's already there. When we chose the passage in the modal, we kept track of that. And when they went straight to the question, authored and saved, we can set up the item already in a 2-column layout or whatever you want. It could have been tabs, you could turn scrolling on, all those sorts of things. So it's about tailoring the authoring to your users' needs depending on what they want. Okay, this is just some examples of what you could do. This one is using the navigate method. So this is just a click event that we've got on a button, and navigate is pretty much a go-to method. As the name suggests, obviously you can navigate around the app. So I can navigate back to the item list view, I can navigate to a new item view, or a widget edit view, which is the question editor itself. But the cool thing about navigate is I can actually pass in JSON. You might think of this as item templates. So in this instance, I've listened to a click event from somewhere. There's some event, and I've actually called this method. all we're doing is off the app instance, author app, we're calling navigate, and we want to go to items, and there's some JSON that we're going to pass in here. This is what we call the item definition. So we have the reference of the item, but the definition describes the item. It describes if you want a 1-column item or a 2-column item. In this instance, we have 2 columns. There's just 2 elements in a regions array. And the width is 50 and 50. It could be 30-70, it could be 60-40, or the reverses of those. And we're just defining that in this column, in this region, we want to put a passage. And in this column, we're going to have a question. We're turning scrolling on. So the whole point here is just a JSON object to describe the layout. You don't need to wade into HTML and do string parsing and injecting things. Just give us the JSON definition of what you want the item to look like, and then we do the rest. We also wanted to, we just got some custom JavaScript here to say, well, what question do you want on the right-hand column and what passage do you want on the left-hand column? And then the route that we're passing to navigate continues, and so we actually want to go straight to widgets. And that's what we ended up doing. So from that create little modal, we went straight to the question editor. Then once we saved, we saw the item as a whole. So that's using the navigate public method. It's very, very powerful. So I recommend checking out the docs, and that really will be your friend if you're doing some customizations. So as we saw, public methods, same as usual. We just turned off our user interface via configuration. We did the same with assessment. Maybe you don't want the save button or the toolbar, turn them off in the configuration. Enter your own HTML elements, style them as you would normally do. Put click events on those to listen to those. Once you've done that, you can then use our public methods, which are available off the application instance. The sample that we saw was navigate. You can programmatically move your authors around the authoring experience between the item, the template view, the thumbnail view to choose. You can set up item templates to shortcut things for authors. You can pass in question templates if you want. Navigate's a very powerful method. So recommend reading the docs there and seeing what you can do with it. So a little bit of a recap, I suppose. Went through our objectives for authoring. We want to keep things powerful. We need them to be flexible. Obviously, you need to extend them, and they've got to be simple. Went through the 101, all regular things, HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Configuring the APIs, we're kind of hammering home this message that it's quite simple to do these things. Configuring is just really the initialization object. You might be label bundles where you're passing different string names for buttons. Often it's just true, false, booleans on an option. Turn that off, turn that on. Extending the solution, so turning things off, putting your own elements in there because you prefer it a certain way for whatever reason. It's easy. Okay, a lot of these things really, once you get used to the Learnosity way, I suppose, it really is easy to get going and doing some pretty powerful things.